a motion that we hold the remaining decision to say whether someone is unexcused till the end of the meeting in case they're running late.
I would second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardy, for the motion, and Commissioner Jackson for the second. Will you please vote on that?
Okay, Commissioner Herman?
Aye.
Commissioner Payne?
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos?
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams? He logged off for a minute to try to fix his squeaky voice. Commissioner Jackson
Aye.
and Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
David, I'm not sure what to do since Commissioner Williams had logged off to try to fix his, let me see, I might need to promote him again.
He's in the chat, Jen.
No.
Let me see if he might have logged back on. So let me see. Here we go. We're gonna.
And Jen, how many is that? How many members?
That just voted.
Yes.
And I just promoted Commissioner Williams to panelist again. Shall I call him for his vote? Or?
Yes, please do.
Commissioner Williams, we just, it was moved and seconded that there would be an unexcused absence for Carson Valenta and Mario Raya. And so we were voting on that. How would you like to vote?
By the way, his name is Raya, and I vote aye. And am I still squeaking?
No,
No.
you're not. Still squeaky.
Okay.
Jen, I think this was the vote on
I-
whether to deal with this at the end of the.
Correct. The motion was to move the vote to the end of the meeting for the
Oh,
unexcused
I'm
absences.
sorry. Okay. So I'm sorry, Commissioner. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Commissioner Williams, is your vote still aye on moving it to the end of the meeting?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion has been passed. We will vote on unexcused absence at the end of this meeting. Thank you, everyone. With that said, moving on to the second item on our agenda for this evening, the adoption of the minutes for our previous November 17th meeting. Has everyone had a chance, has received those minutes and had a chance to review them?
Yes.
And has anyone opened for discussion on those minutes prior to accepting them and adopting them as record?
Williams here. I believe there's an error kind of on the topic of excused absences. Jan, could you pull up the draft minutes and scroll down to the section where it's, I forget who made a motion that was seconded and such. And then I'll tell you what I believe is erroneous.
Are we referring to the December 17th minutes, just to clarify?
November.
November 17th, I'm sorry.
That's correct.
I did not have that scheduled to screen share. If you'll give me a minute, I will try to pull that up.
Basically, while we're doing that, it says it was unanimous decision to excuse any commissioners not present, except for Commissioners Freyer and Rhea. My recollection clearly was that Mr. Galasian had suggested we show magnanimity and mark them all as excused. And secondly, if you think about the logic, we are excusing everybody not present except for those not present. Struck me as very odd. So I would like to move to strike the words "with exception."
I would second that.
Thank you. The motion has been made to strike the comment with exception. It has been seconded. Shall we take that to vote?
I'm sorry, who, Commissioner Williams made the motion?
Correct.
Correct.
And who seconded?
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Hardy,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Payne,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion has been passed to strike the words with exception. Are we willing to make a motion to accept the minutes as revised?
Williams,
Eric.
move so.
Chair, can I make one quick suggestion before
Yes,
we
please.
about motioning? Because I see there is a little bit of a lag in terms of the screens popping up for people who are speaking. If you are making a motion or seconding a motion, I think it'd be easiest if you say, I make the motion that we accept the minutes as amended. This is Commissioner blank. And then say, I second that. This is Commissioner blank. That might just facilitate things a little easier.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Williams, would you like to make a motion?
I move that we accept the minutes as amended.
I will
Commissioner
second that
Williams here.
motion. This is Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. Minutes have been accepted, voted in as revised.
Chair, we had a motion and a second, and we still didn't have the vote on accepting the amended minutes. So it was a motion by Commissioner Williams, and I think second
Thank
by
you.
Jackson. Thank you.
You are correct. I got ahead of myself. Thank you. Jan, would you please take the vote for us?
Commissioner Hardy,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Payne,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. Now I will declare that the vote has been approved and the motions have been accepted as revised. Moving on to item number 3 on our agenda tonight. Informational item, current and upcoming transportation projects and programs. I would like to turn this over to Jennifer. Please.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a brief introduction. So Anna Zierman, our senior transportation planner with the city, is going to be giving this presentation, but I just wanted to give everyone a brief overview of the presentation. So this is really trying to give you a perspective on all the projects, the transportation related projects that transportation planning as well as our public works capital group is working on right now. So there's a lot in this presentation. We've got a pretty tight timeline tonight for fitting both of these presentations in. So Anna might move through it rather quickly, but we wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of get a sense of all the work that we're doing right now and the work that's going to be coming up next year. And I know I shared some of this information with you at the first meeting when we talked about the work plan, but this will give you a little bit more specific information about some of the projects, particularly as it relates to a lot of the capital projects that our Public Works Department has been working on. And I wanted to share with you too that while some of these you'll have some involvement in, like projects like the Transportation System Plan, later next year, the McLoughlin Safety Improvement Project, There's other projects that Anna will go over that you won't necessarily see or be directly involved in, but we wanted to let you know about those projects and those programs, just in case you hear about it when you're out in the community or if you're talking with others. We didn't want you to maybe not know about them or get caught off guard. So we tried to provide you a comprehensive kind of list of the different policies and programs and projects that you may be involved in and that you may hear about in the community. And if you want more information on those, as Anna goes through, we're happy to provide more specific information, particularly as it relates to, there's a lot of capital projects that we have going on right now. Most of those are in places that won't be coming to the commission for review because we're already on specific grant implementation timelines, requirements where we have to spend funds by, or we've already purchased right of way and we've completed the environmental planning process. So there's things that are already in place that would prevent like large modifications to these types of projects. But we'd be happy to share the plans with you if you're interested in looking at them, just to get a better sense of what they entail. And so with that, I just wanted to give you a brief overview, and then I'll just hand it off to Anna to get started.
Thanks, Jennifer. I will share my screen. Give me just a moment here. Right. Thank you all for your time this evening. As Jennifer mentioned, my name is Anna Dearman. I'm a senior transportation planner at the city. Thank you so much again for having me this evening. I will try to make this as efficient as possible because we do have another presentation. So as just an overview of this presentation, we will review your role as it relates to how you will see these policies, programs, projects, priorities in the future, and then we'll walk through some of those items. So you all are filling a previously unmet role at the city. No current boards or commissions are tasked with transportation policy and implementation. Council identified this as a need given the increasing complexity with transportation projects and trade-offs within the right-of-way. Council identified the need for a TMC at their 2019 retreat, and it's also a recommended strategy in multiple citywide plans. So an example of one of the complicated projects that we're seeing nowadays is the West Side Bike Mobility Project, which you can see an example of the outreach materials from that project in the image on your slide. So again, your role and the scope of your authority is to advise City Council, the city manager, and staff on transportation-related issues. You will review and make recommendations on transportation programs, policies, and large capital projects related to the public right-of-way, as well as council-identified priorities. Some of the programs that you will be reviewing, and we'll get into these a bit later in the presentation, are the Transportation Improvement Program, the Pavement Management Program, and our Safety, Accessibility, Mobility Program potentially. Some of the policies that you may be involved with will be the Transportation System Plan, our Complete Streets Policy, Vancouver Municipal Code Title 11 updates, and smart mobility policies that may come into play. As far as projects, you'll be reviewing projects in the public right-of-way at a larger scale. So these are projects that exceed $2 million and have area-wide or regional significance. Again, council may direct you to review other transportation-related issues. You may also appoint technical advisory groups. So for example, if you all wanted to develop a technical advisory group focused on accessibility or bicycle mobility or something like that, then that is something that you could do. There are limitations on your responsibility, on your role and scope. You are not responsible to respond to requests for pothole filling and stop signs, things related to street maintenance and repair, and then traffic operations. Those are under the purview of staff. So again, just as a review, you will interact with other commissions, though you are transportation focused. So the Planning Commission will still review growth management related policies. the transportation system plan as a component of the comprehensive plan will still go to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission may also be identifying a member to serve as liaison to the Transportation and Mobility Commission. So they would have a non-voting role on the TMC. They would attend meetings and again, sort of serve as that sort of relationship builder. The Parking Advisory Committee reviews projects that occur within parking management zones. So that is downtown and uptown. So there obviously may be some projects that overlap both the PAC's purview and your purview. And then the Bicycle and Pedestrian Stakeholder Group is a former group. There is a bicycle and pedestrian representation on the TMC and some folks who formerly participated in the Bike Ped Stakeholder Group, but the BPSG is no longer formally supported by the city. So one of the biggest projects that you'll be working on is the Transportation System Plan, which is the city's 20-year vision for transportation. As I mentioned, it's an element of the comprehensive plan, and so Planning Commission will be reviewing this as well. You will hear more about the Transportation System Plan in January 2021 when our consultants on the project will give a presentation. And this will be a sort of longer term planning process, currently anticipated to wrap up in 2022. And so we'll be coming to you several times with more information on the Transportation System Plan. It's currently in the existing conditions phase where we've reviewed sort of the current state of the transportation system. And there's an online open house that is live right now through spring 2021, where you can learn more and share comments and ideas on the transportation system. That's at www.beheardvancouver.org/Vancouver Moves. The Complete Streets policy will likely be updated as part of the Transportation System Plan update. The goal of the Complete Streets policy is to enable people of all ages and abilities to travel safely and comfortably around the city, regardless of how they choose to get around. The Transportation Improvement Program, by contrast, is a short-term, basically list of projects to be implemented. So the TIP is basically our list of projects that we are going to construct or implement within 6 years. We're required by state law to update this project list essentially annually, and so you'll be seeing the annual TIP every year. This is also our opportunity to update streets functional classification and to remove and add streets in relation to the network. The pavement management program, you will also hear more about probably early next year from our public works partners who manage that program. The goal is really to kind of maintain a certain level of quality of pavements rather than fixing the streets that are in the worst condition. And so the way that the program currently prioritizes streets simply uses what's known as a pavement condition index, or PCI. So it's a rating of the physical quality of the street. And so the PCIs are calculated for every street citywide, and then that is how the pavement management program determines which streets get repaved or reconstructed on an annual basis. You've probably realized that I'm not exactly reading the slides. They do contain some more detailed information on each of these programs, so please feel free to go back and review later. So another program that you all will be reviewing is the city's Transportation Demand Management Program. So Transportation Demand Management is essentially a non-infrastructure based approach to managing the right-of-way and sort of travel. And so it's a way of trying to encourage folks to use different modes of transportation to reduce congestion and various other goals. So currently the city has a few transportation demand management programs. One is Destination Downtown. You may be familiar with this program if you have frequented downtown This program is currently on hold, but essentially it incentivized people working downtown to use non-drive alone modes of transportation, and then there were incentives to local businesses. Get There Southwest Washington, Jan actually manages this program. It's a regionally coordinated effort. It's actually coordinated with Oregon as well to promote alternatives to those single occupancy vehicle trips for people living and working in Southwest Washington. The Commute Trip Reduction Program is a state mandated program for communities of a certain size, which is targeted at the largest employers in our community, again, to help them educate their employees on options for avoiding non-drive alone trips. Options for avoiding drive alone trips, that is. These are other programs just to make you aware of. You may or may not be involved in these programs. The Safety, Accessibility, and Mobility Program provides annual funding for multimodal projects. And so those are ADA, ramp improvements, sidewalk infill, bicycle improvements. That's not a significant amount of funding to do sort of larger scale capital work. The Sidewalk Management Program, recently we completed a sidewalk inventory assessing the condition of sidewalks citywide. And so the goal of this program would be to implement sidewalk improvements citywide. So again, not exactly sure what your purview over that program will be. And then the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program is separate from the work of the TMC. The city manages this program in partnership with the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Alliance, which is a neighborhood group. So for this project, community members can propose a location with an identified traffic concern such as speeding, and then it's a competitive grant program where they work with city staff to identify a solution to that traffic issue, and then the various projects that are proposed are then evaluated and ranked by NTSA members, and a few projects are constructed every year. This program has been on hold in 2020 due to COVID budget impacts, but it is reinstated for 2021 and 2022. And I just emphasize this program because it's a good sort of talking point if you're in the community, people are expressing a traffic concern. This is a great option for people to really champion an improvement. So Jennifer mentioned most of the large capital projects that we have going right now are at a stage in plan development where we really can't accommodate any changes. So these projects are grant funded through agencies like WSDOT, Washington State Department of Transportation, or the federal government. And so we're on a tight timeline for things like environmental approvals and funding for the various stages of design and construction. And so let us know if you have any questions on these projects. We just want to make you aware of them in case questions come up throughout the communities, just so you can be informed that there will be additional work on these projects in the future. So one large project is Southeast 1st Street between Southeast 164th Avenue and Southeast 192nd Avenue. This street currently is just we call it a farm to market road. It's not really, it doesn't really have sort of urban standards like curbs and gutters and sidewalks and things like that. And so this project will complete a full urban upgrade to Southeast 1st Street with off-street biking and walking facilities. It's at 90% design and will go to construction starting in 2021. The image on this slide is sort of a preliminary design for a protected intersection at Southeast 1st Street. There will be protected intersections and protected roundabouts which separate people walking and biking through the intersection from people driving through the intersection. And these will be the first facilities of these kind in the city. Northeast 18th Street between Northeast 97th Avenue and Northeast 107th Avenue. This segment of Northeast 18th Street is currently non-existent. And so building this segment will complete a gap in the 18th Street corridor. It also features a multi-use path along this segment. So we, again, are excited about this project. It's at 75% design. So again, really too far along in the process for substantial comment. Southeast 5th Street from Fort Vancouver Way to Reserve Street is essentially a parking lot upgrade in partnership with the National Park Service, which owns and manages a lot of land in the area. However, we will get some sidewalk improvements and some other multimodal improvements as part of the project, which is at 70% design. Jefferson Kaufman Avenues, this is in sort of the industrial crescent area, just west of downtown, north of the waterfront. So this project will realign the offset intersection of Jefferson and Kaufman Avenues and improve multimodal connectivity between Mill Plain and the waterfront. That's at 50% design. Northeast 137th Avenue between Northeast 49th Street and 4th Plain. Again, we'll complete a gap in existing upgrades to this formerly county road, bringing it up to urban standards with multimodal facilities. And this segment is a continuation of previous segments that have been upgraded. And so it will essentially look like those segments that have previously been upgraded. It'll be a continuation of those improvements. These are biking and walking focused capital projects. So Northeast 68th Street is being developed in partnership with the county, the city-county limit line sort of bisects Northeast 68th Street just west of St. John's Boulevard. So we'll be adding sidewalk on the south side of the street from the city limit line to St. John's Boulevard. That project's at 90% design. The Northwest Neighborhood Connectivity Project is located in the Northwest neighborhood, sort of essentially north of downtown Vancouver. There are not sidewalks on much of Lincoln Avenue in this vicinity. And so this project adds some sidewalk as well as crossing improvements to cross Lincoln Avenue. Additional sidewalk infill on 53rd Street, which connects Lincoln Avenue to Franklin Elementary, and then sort of a safe, comfortable route for students walking to Franklin Elementary with a pathway just behind Franklin Elementary to the west, and that project's at 75% design. Divine Road is a multimodal project. Divine is located between Mill Plain and 18th Street. Mill Plain and 18th Street. It's the only arterial in the vicinity without sidewalk. And so this project will add a multi-use path between Idaho and 18th Street. There's existing sidewalk between Mill Plain and Idaho. And part of this project has already been constructed. There is a pedestrian crossing at Divine and Idaho with the flashing lights. It's called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, and that has already been installed, again, at Divine and Idaho. And then the remainder of the project will install this multi-use path between Idaho and 18th Street. Tech Center Drive is almost completely constructed. Some of the critical elements have not quite been constructed, but this project is in East Vancouver on Tech Center Drive between basically just east of 164th Avenue. It also includes Tech Center Place or Southeast 167th Avenue between 15th Street and Tech Center Drive, and then Tech Center Drive up to just north of Mill Plain where it turns into 172nd Avenue. This project has added protected bike lanes on Tech Center Drive, sharrows or a shared roadway for people biking and driving on 167th Avenue, as well as traffic calming speed cushions there. And it will add a protected intersection at Tech Center Drive and Tech Center Place. The protection for the bike lanes and then some of the vertical elements for the protected intersection, as well as some of the signal and bicyclist detection improvements have not yet been constructed, and those will be constructed hopefully as soon as possible in 2021. But the bike lanes have been installed and the sharrows and traffic calming have been installed. So I encourage you to check out that project That was a grant-funded project that we were on kind of a tight timeline to complete. A couple other biking, walking capital projects. Again, this is pretty much information only. There is a multi-use path planned along Evergreen Highway from Chelsea to Chelsea Avenue to Image Road. So right now we're in the process of purchasing right-of-way for the shared use path. The actual construction stage of the project is not yet funded. And then the segment between 100th Court and Weber Arboretum, we will start design. The next stage would be to start design for the shared use path on the south side of the highway, and then right-of-way and construction would be components of that too. This project is not quite as far along, but it is constrained based on existing funding for the project. So some safety improvement projects that you may see again. The West Side Bike Mobility Project will implement safety and mobility improvements on Columbia Street between Columbia Way and 45th Street. That's currently anticipated for 2021. The McLoughlin Boulevard Safety Improvement Project, that was a pilot project to install buffered bike lanes and maintain the existing sharrows along McLoughlin Boulevard between Reserve and Brant. And currently we're evaluating the project. And as you know, I'll be giving an informational presentation on this project next in tonight's meeting. You may see this project again in order to make recommendations on it next year. The Fourth Plain Boulevard Safety Improvement Project involves a traffic study to determine impacts of potential roadway reconfiguration along with public outreach. So we currently have funding to reconsider improvements to the segment between F Street and Fort Vancouver Way. And then there is a paving project planned for the segment between F Street to, I believe it's Andreessen or 65th. It's not exactly determined, but pavement projects are an opportunity to sort of reimagine what the roadway looks like from a striping perspective. And so if there are ways that we can improve safety, then we strive to do that with the annual pavement program. So here is a quick look. I understand this is a detailed map at sort of a small scale. And so these are the 2021 through, I believe it's 2023 proposed pavement projects. You can see that they really span across the city. And so again, we'll talk in more detail about the annual pavement program, but these are opportunities to improve these streets, again, from a striping perspective. So in coordination with the pavement program, there are a few streets on the radar for 2021 through 2023. So Southeast 34th Street between Southeast 162nd Avenue and Southeast 192nd Avenue. We currently have funding to conduct a traffic study to consider reconfiguring that roadway. And then we have a scope for design and public outreach. This is going to sound kind of redundant because these are basically the stages in these planning and implementation processes for transportation projects. Another project is Northeast 112th Avenue between Southeast Chicala Drive and SR or State Route 500. Again, traffic study, design, public outreach anticipated 2021. And then Fort Vancouver Way between Mill Plain Boulevard and Fourth Plain Boulevard. This is adjacent to Clark College. Design, traffic study, public outreach anticipated 2022. So these projects have not yet begun. We just know that they are planned for some type of paving treatment in the next few years based on the condition of the street and pavement's approach to preserving streets. We're also involved in a lot of regional coordination projects. These are with partners like the Washington State Department of Transportation or WashDOT, like with our local transit agency, CTran, and with interstate agencies such as the Oregon Department of Transportation and the effort with the interstate or I-5 bridge. So currently we're working on the State Route 501 project, which is actually the Mill Plain Boulevard and 15th Street couplet in downtown. WashDOT received money through a freight funding source to improve this corridor, and will actually be adding the city's first parking protected bike lanes through this corridor. WashDOT is also working on a widening project on State Route 14 in the vicinity of I-205, and that's to try to mitigate some traffic concerns. C-Tran is working on the Mill Plain Bus Rapid Transit project. This would add another line to the Vine Bus Rapid Transit project on 4th Plain. And then again, the joint WashDOT, ODOT Interstate Bridge Replacement Project is underway. So pending on priorities that come before council over the next few years, you may be involved in other projects and programs. So previously council had asked staff to develop a draft structure for a potential electric scooter, dockless, bike share program. These devices and modes are known as micromobility. And so staff actually did draft sort of an explanation of what such a program would look like. And then council paused on any action or further development in order to put together the Transportation and Mobility Commission and to potentially task you all with reviewing a potential program. But again, that priority is not sort of certain until we don't know exactly what the next steps are on that and whether that will come before you. Council also identified safety, equity, and climate change priorities in the 2021-2022 biennial budget process. We don't know exactly what those priorities will look like as far as transportation programs. But again, we know that these are council priorities, and so there may be initiatives coming down the pipeline that will fall under your purview related to safety, equity, and climate change. Though safety has been a priority area for transportation planning for a while. Are there any questions on key transportation projects and programs before we move on to McLoughlin?
I have one quick question. Thank you, Anna. This is Commissioner Ruggles, and if I understand you correctly, the traffic calming neighborhood program is grant funded and competitive. And I was just wondering where the funding for those grants come from. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. Yes, sorry, I probably was confusing. That's actually it's a city grant program, and so the city is the granting agency essentially in that program. We don't really call it a grant program with the community, but it is essentially a competitive sort of mini grant program. So the city receives funding for that program through the biennial budget process. So council just approved funding for that program for 2021 and 2022. And then we also receive funding through the real estate excise tax, as well as we previously received funding for the program through the Transportation Benefit District fees. So those were the fees that were levied on license tab renewals. Those fees went away with Initiative 976, which was adopted in 2019. And though the courts in Washington State have struck down I-976, we are still anticipating potential sort of issues with that funding source. And so for right now, the traffic calming program is funded through the REITs, that real estate excise tax, and the city budget.
Thank you.
Thanks, good question. Thanks for clarifying.
Ken Williams here. I'm curious to know if the TMC will have any involvement with the review of the Section 30 plan.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Were you asking about a specific element of reviewing the Section 30 plan?
Well, I just understand that the plan is, I don't know, some 20 years old and is not, the constraints around the problem have significantly changed in the last quarter century. and that it is under a relook to kind of redo that plan and the conclusions drawn in it. So I'm just wondering if there'd be any involvement from the TMC or if that's going to go through other channels.
So at this point, there is a review of the Section 30 plan internally, but there's no plan. And when I say review, that's just kind of working through the document and understanding kind of the process that went into the development of the original Section 30 plan. But there aren't any formal plans to update the Section 30 sub-area plan at this time. If that is something that the city decides to pursue, it potentially could come to the Transportation and Mobility Commission because it would have some transportation related policies that might be outlined in it. But from what I understand at this point, that's not something that's being formally updated.
Thank you.
Did I see someone waving with a question, Leah?
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner Jackson here. So I'm curious, just to clarify, the pavement plan that we're talking about, F Street to Andreessen, I don't know if you're saying that it's going to be repaved from F Street to Andreessen. And previously I'd brought up that the bike lanes actually end on, I believe they end between C and D Street. So for connectivity, I was wondering if we could have language that states that we would be connecting those bike lanes, only because I've served on other projects where we lose that if we don't continue having the language in there.
Right, thank you for making that point again. I remember you making that point in a previous meeting. Yes, we will ensure that the scope of the project, as Jennifer, I believe, said in response to your previous question, that includes up to where the bike lanes currently end at C and D Street. So yes, to answer the other part of your question, currently the paving project is between F Street, and that boundary is adjustable based on the scope of the project. And then, like I said, I think it's between Andreessen or 65th, and that's subject to change. And so that is outside of the F Street to Fort Vancouver Way segment, which would include up to the end of the bike lane. The rest of the segment is a repaving project, but again, an opportunity to look at, to incorporate that segment within the bounds of the traffic study and to implement any recommendations through that process.
Okay. I just know we have places where bike lanes start and stop, and so I want to make sure that we don't overlook that.
Thank you. Matt Herman, Commissioner Herman.
So I know in 2020, the council put the Stronger Vancouver initiative on hold. If they move forward with that in 2021, will they direct us to look at that program and potential capital projects associated with that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure yet. We can look into that.
And I have another question.
Yes.
You mentioned that this body can create technical advisory groups. So I'm just wondering if we're going to get a little bit more guidance about what sort of aspects would be permissible and how we would go about doing that.
Yes, that's a great question. We hadn't really fleshed out what that process would look like, and so we could come back to you with more detail around that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. My question isn't directly related to what you just went over, but as we're listening to all these presentations, and if we have questions or someone else raises a question and we want to communicate gathering more information, do we communicate that to staff? Do we do that all email so everyone in the commission knows what we've asked? And how does that affect the OPMA where you have a quorum and it has to be announced? I don't quite understand the channels for communicating via email.
Chair, if I may take a
Thank you.
quick stab at part of the answer.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. So Commissioner Hardy, one of the things I would suggest is definitely do not email all commissioners. That is just an easy way to generate an email string that could potentially lead to an OPMA issue. Certainly, and I'll let staff speak to how they would prefer to handle this, but my general advice would be, if you are communicating something germane to an agenda item, that it be directed specifically to staff and leave the rest of the commissioners out of it. And if there is part of that that needs to be disseminated to the commission at large, then staff has the capability to do that and blind copy everybody on an email, so that way you don't have these kinds of lists and that potential for these email strings that could lead to serial communication and potentially an unintended meeting through a quorum unintentionally.
Yeah, that was my question about the protocol. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So if there's no further comments, I think we shall move into item number 4 on our agenda. If we can proceed with the McLoughlin Safety Project evaluation. Jennifer, did you have anything else that you wanted to add, a preface to that?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to just give a brief introduction again for this presentation that Anna will be giving. So the McLoughlin Safety Improvement Project is something our group has been working on for a couple of years now. And so this presentation is to really just give you a background on the project and bring you up to date where we are in the process. We are continuing to work on this through an evaluation process that's currently going on right now, and that will continue well into 2021. And as we noted in the work plan that we shared with you, it most likely will come back to you late 2021 as an action item, but we'll bring it to you again beforehand as another informational item to give you an overview of kind of the results of the evaluation process. So this is just, it's been a pretty complex project just in terms of the number of times the design has changed and the public outreach process that we have gone through. So there's a lot that Anna's going to be going through tonight. She did a really great job. We offer very detailed slides, so there's a lot of information on the slides. So she's going to be going through and providing you that background on the project. But again, you know, let her know as she goes through if there's questions, and she'll kind of stop kind of at different phases of the project just to check in with everybody to see if anybody has any questions. But again, it's just foundational to get you up to speed on the project, and then we'll be doing more work with you on this in the coming year.
Thank you. Still, Anna, I believe you're still on mute.
Thank you, Chair Payne.
Thank you.
All right, let's try this again. So as Jennifer mentioned, I have a lot of information, a lot of slides here just to bring you up to speed on the history and background of the McLoughlin Safety Improvement Project, the ultimate pilot project that was implemented, and the evaluation phase of the project, which is where we're at now. That will be sort of the sequence of the presentation. And like Jennifer said, I'll try to stop after each sort of section and take any questions. I do want to be mindful of trying to end around 5:30 so that we could be sure to take public comment. So by way of background, the 2016 to 2021 City Council Strategic Plan identified McLoughlin among other streets, in addition to the Complete Streets policy, as priorities for implementation for safety improvements to serve people of all ages and abilities, including people biking and walking. So with that sort of charge, we conducted an existing conditions analysis. This is the segment of McLoughlin between Reserve Street and Brant Road. Initially, the project also included the segment of Brant Road between McLoughlin Boulevard and Mill Plain Boulevard, and then the segment of Mill Plain Boulevard between Brant Road and MacArthur Boulevard. Those segments will be dealt with in the future. So backpedaling a tiny bit, with the existing conditions analysis, we looked at driver speed and volume counts on the corridor, turning movement counts at specific signalized intersections, in-field measurements to confirm the width of the street, which vary significantly across the corridor, a parking utilization study on McLoughlin between Reserve and Brant, including side streets, 1 block in each direction, a driveway capacity analysis, a collision analysis of crashes between 2012 and 2016, and then we identified transit routes and bus stops along the corridor. So here are the findings of some of that existing conditions analysis, as well as a map. And so we found that speeds were relatively high for the corridor. In some segments, the volume of drivers per day was pretty high, and then collisions were much higher than we would expect from a roadway with this character. The on-street parking utilization range between about 32 to 43%, and you can see the other numbers displayed. This slide includes the driveway capacity analysis of where driveways were available and where multi-vehicle driveways were available. So the initial design, and you'll see this slide repeated as the design evolved. The initial design included traffic calming or speed cushions on McLoughlin between Reserve and Brant, enhanced pedestrian crossings, so those flashing lights, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons at the intersections with 32nd Ave and 13th Street, a two-way protected bicycle facility on the south side of McLoughlin between Reserve and Brant, and the west side of Brant between McLoughlin and Mill Plain. And then protected bike lanes on Mill Plain between Brant and MacArthur, and then the slip lane leading from eastbound Mill Plain onto eastbound MacArthur would be closed and would be available for bicycle access only. Currently, that slip lane is a shared biking and driving facility. So this is what the initial cross section looked like with that 12-foot two-way bike lane. So people would be going in both directions. They would have 6 feet in each direction essentially, and then a 3-foot buffer with vertical protection. This is a specific segment of McLoughlin. I didn't include all of the cross sections, but street widths on McLoughlin range from, I believe, about 36 feet in this segment, essentially west of Grand, to I believe up to 44 feet in the segment between Grand and Brant. This was the initial design between Grand and Brant with a wider buffer given that wider street width. So the public outreach process for this design proposal included 2 open houses in July 2018, notification to neighborhood associations, including presentations to neighborhood associations in the former bicycle and pedestrian stakeholder group, postcard mailings, email notification. We coordinated with service providers along the corridor, including the Washington State School for the Blind, C-Tran, our solid waste providers, and the Postal Service. And this is pretty typical of transportation projects. So what we heard from folks during the 2018 public outreach was strong support for the traffic calming proposed and the enhanced pedestrian crossings. Many residents were concerned about the impact of the two-way protected bike facility on residents along the corridor, because implementing that facility would require removing on-street parking on both sides of the street. So given that feedback, we analyzed other potential routes to try to provide this facility that met complete street standards in the vicinity, so sort of a key gap in the city's east-west bicycle network. So further analyzed potential impacts of removing parking on McLoughlin between Reserve and Brant. That's when the driveway capacity analysis came into play, and we looked at an alternative route along 13th Street, looking at the traffic counts on that corridor and in-field analysis. If you've been on that street, it has a significant grade issue, as well as environmental constraints, and so that option was not feasible. So in November 2018, we provided an update on the project to City Council, along with updates on other elements of our Complete Streets program. We recommended implementing a hybrid option on McLoughlin, which included the permanent speed cushions between Reserve and Brant, the enhanced pedestrian crossings, and we proposed piloting a two-way protected bike facility that was narrower than the initial design and would preserve parking on one side of the street, given the street width. It's based on the feedback we received from council and residents on the corridor. We completed additional research and evaluation to consider another design alternative for the pilot project to mitigate some of these on-street parking impacts. So this is design number 2. We're moving on to design number 3. So the revised design included the traffic calming and enhanced pedestrian crossings that were previously proposed. The two-way protected bike facility, I've tried to show the changes in blue, was shifted to the north side of McLoughlin and narrowed a bit to preserve that parking along one side of the street. And then the slip lane and protected bike lanes on Mill Plain and that transition to MacArthur stayed the same. So essentially what changed here is that we are proposing to shift the bicycle facility to the north side of the street to narrow it up from 12 feet to 10 feet. So that's 5 feet in each direction. And that preserves parking on the segment between Grand and Brant. You can see that parking on the south side of the street. So just to reiterate, this presentation is very redundant, but it can be kind of hard to track the evolution of the design. The traffic calming and pedestrian crossings would be permanent, as well as the bike-only slip lane. And then we would pilot that two-way protected bike facility. And I guess just as way of explanation, to pilot something is to construct it using somewhat temporary methods. So they're durable, but the idea is that it's sort of a test. It's sort of a proof of concept. And so if, you know, that facility didn't really work out, then it could be modified. If it was really working, then it could be made permanent in the future. And any needed alterations could be incorporated with future permanent construction, if that makes sense. So to pilot the two-way bike facility would have resulted in the loss of parking on both sides of McLoughlin between Reserve and Grand, but it would have preserved parking on one side of McLoughlin between Grand and Brant. Sort of the basis of this recommendation was on the safety conditions, limited right-of-way available, striving to meet these complete street standards, and then feedback from the public outreach and the alternatives analysis. Basically trying to kind of work within those constraints. So the idea was that the pilot would be implemented in late summer 2019 and would be in place through summer 2020. During the pilot, staff would work with property owners on the parking impacts by helping folks identify alternative parking options or by potentially improving side streets to accommodate more on-street parking. The pilot project would be formally evaluated through technical analysis and additional community feedback. Any resulting changes would be implemented with planned paving projects, kind of like I mentioned. The traffic calming and enhanced pedestrian crossings would be permanent, and then Mill Plain and the slip lane would be sort of dealt with as a separate process. So with this proposal to implement the pilot two-way bike facility on the north side of McLoughlin, we conducted 2 open houses in sort of winter, spring 2019, and then much of the other outreach was the same, sort of consistently going back to folks. So this is a bit of an aside, not exactly related, but somewhat related. In March of 2019, we were notified that we were successful in applying for $700,000 from the Washington State Transportation Improvement Board to implement our Complete Streets program. And so that funding went to construct a portion of the McLoughlin improvements, just the speed cushions and the enhanced pedestrian crossings. And then it was initially intended to be used for the improvements to the slip lane and to Tech Center Drive. And then Tech Center Drive ended up being more expensive than initially anticipated. And so the $700,000 in TIB funding was used for Tech Center Drive improvements. And our current plan is to use a bit of the remaining funding for some bicycle and pedestrian counters citywide. So that's, again, somewhat related. So sort of stepping back into the narrative of the project, we have done this outreach around the pilot, the two-way sort of narrow pilot on the north side of McLoughlin to preserve parking on the south side of McLoughlin. Given that it was a pilot, so it was a temporary project, there were some issues that came up with mail delivery. And so in previously coordinating with the Post Service on a permanent bicycle facility, USPS would have required mailboxes along the corridor to be consolidated, which is more convenient for USPS and more secure for customers in a variety of ways, but that is a pretty permanent solution to a temporary project. And so given that we could not do the mailbox consolidation for a temporary one-year pilot project, we ended up recommending a revised pilot project. So this is now design number 4, if you're tracking. Traffic calming, enhanced pedestrian crossings stay the same. The bike facility is really what changed. So we went from a protected bike facility on one side of the street where you could bike in both directions to buffered bike lanes between Reserve and Brant. And then on the segment between Grand and Brant, we would preserve the existing sharrows and then evaluate the effectiveness of the sharrows. And there'd be no parking removal. So a pretty dramatic shift in the design between the initial sort of proposal for the pilot project. And then again, the slip lane and mill plane would be implemented in the future. So this is another cross-section of what the pilot project looks like. Buffered bike lanes, so there is the separation between the bike lane and the driving lane, but there is no vertical element protecting the bike lane. This is between Reserve and Grand on McLoughlin. And then really nothing changed between Grand and Brant on McLoughlin except the speed cushions were installed. So the elements were constructed in summer 2019. And then before I had mentioned, as part of the pilot process, the city committed to evaluating the pilot elements with the potential to modify, make permanent, remove those elements in the future. And so initially the evaluation was scheduled to begin in winter, spring 2020. And then obviously COVID happened and there were significant budget impacts. Staff shifted to sort of emergency response tasks. As you probably know and have experienced yourselves, travel patterns and travel behavior changed dramatically in terms of the volume of people driving, speeds have changed, the use of sort of biking and walking modes and facilities have changed. We also anticipated in-person, what are known as intercept surveys, to sort of interview folks informally on the pilot project, and given social distancing or physical distancing requirements, that survey method was not going to be possible. And then we were also just sensitive that sort of everyone in the community, all community members, were to different degrees reeling from COVID and had less bandwidth to engage in sort of an evaluation process. So we took a few months to kind of revise the evaluation process. It was finally launched in summer 2020. It is currently ongoing, as Jennifer said, through 2021. There is an online survey that is currently live through the end of 2020. So it closes December 31st, 2020. We're hoping that all users, people who live in the area, people who travel through the area, will complete that survey. There's also a feedback map where you can sort of place a pin on a location that you have concerns or feedback on. And these are at www.beheardvancouver.org/McLoughlin Safety Project, and that URL will be on the next page. We did a lot of the same outreach to be consistent, and we are collecting data again to evaluate, have these improvements made a difference in terms of driver speeds and volumes, the number of people biking and walking, driver yielding behavior at the enhanced pedestrian crossings, and parking utilization. So this diagram just kind of shows where the improvements are located, kind of their function. If you take the survey online, this kind of walks you through sort of the user experience with that survey and what we're really asking people about. The buffered bike lanes, those are a pilot element. How's that working for you? This is a before and after, since I've been talking about these things more in the abstracts. This is what the street looked like before and after. Between Grand and Brant, where we maintained the sharrows, again, this essentially looks the same, except there are those speed cushions now. You can see some of the striping related to that. Here's some photos of the enhanced pedestrian crossings that were installed. And then again, the speed cushions throughout the corridor. This is the segment between Reserve and Grand. So again, as far as the evaluation process goes, I really just want to make you aware of what has led up to the evaluation process and that it is ongoing. And please encourage people in your community and your network to weigh in. The online survey closes at the end of this year, as I said. This week, we're going out with more outreach materials just to make people aware that they have about a month left to give feedback on this stage of the project. There's a link to the online survey and feedback map, which is just on the Be Heard Vancouver project page. And then the technical analysis will continue. We'll continue to do more driver counts, things like that, with potentially other elements related to the evaluation process, TBD. You may be asked to make a formal recommendation as part of the evaluation process. The findings may be presented to City Council next year. And then again, improvements including the slip lane and bike facilities on Brant and Mill Plain will either be implemented as part of potential future changes to McLoughlin to come out of the evaluation process or as separate efforts. So I realize I did not stop at the various stages of the presentation for questions, and I apologize for that because I know it's a lot to digest, but I'm happy to take any questions now, and I just want to make sure we have plenty of time for public comment. So Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That was a lot of very helpful information. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to ask prior to our citizen communications?
I would just offer a comment to put the McLoughlin project in a greater context, which is that colloquially there's a bicycle route called the Scottish route. It's McLoughlin to MacArthur to McGilvray. And it is it's kind of the only viable bicycle route from the west side of town to the east side of town. Really, it broadly parallels Mill Plain. So it's very, very important access, effectively the only one for cyclists east to west.
Matt? Commissioner Herman?
Fine, Matt's fine. So I really appreciate you and the iterative process with this project and going back and forth. I am making the assumption that once the evaluations come back, they're going to run the gambit as far as for or against it. And I think you answered this on the last slide, but it sounds like the TMC is going to be involved in evaluating whether we recommend the council moves forward with the pilot project or reverts back to the way it was. Is that correct?
Thanks for that question, Commissioner Herman. So yes, we will bring, as Jennifer said, the results of the evaluation. So the technical analysis, sort of the summary of community feedback, the themes that sort of arose from that feedback. We will likely be bringing that back to you all next year. And then, you know, we anticipate that you all will be making a recommendation, but we're not exactly sure what sort of the process will be for kind of wrapping up the pilot and what comes after that.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything briefly?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is when was the last time that the neighborhood associations actually, you had direct contact with them? Was that before the COVID? And now their way of communicating with us is through attending meetings and voicing concerns during the public comment section time? That's the first question. And then the second question is how does equity play into this, and also context sensitivity with the Washington State Department of Transportation? Are we really kind of looking at that? Because when we say all ages and abilities, do all ages and abilities really reflect the use that a particular street has? So those were just some questions.
Thank you. So we have had contact with the neighborhood associations both before and after COVID, the onset of COVID. So after COVID and things like neighborhood association meetings went virtual, we have already met with 2 neighborhood associations, and then we'll be meeting with the Harney Heights Neighborhood Association actually tomorrow night. So we've been giving presentations to their neighborhood meetings. And then as far as other outreach sort of in the neighborhood, just this week we've launched yard signs, postcards, flyers on people's cars. We'll do door hangers, and we have done actually another phase of sort of materials distribution after COVID. So we did yard signs, flyer mailings previously. That was earlier in the summer. And then I believe you're asking about the Washington State School for the Blinds along the corridor.
No, the Washington Department of Transportation with the context sensitivity, how that plays in and how equity plays in on this.
Sure. So I'm sorry, I misunderstood and thought you were asking about how the Washington State School for the Blind, how we've coordinated with them. So in terms of context sensitivity and equity, I think it actually does relate to the School for the Blind. So in terms of vulnerable road users, and again, council has not sort of defined equity as it relates to transportation projects, but we have coordinated with the Washington State School for the Blind, which uses the corridor as their sort of training field. And so they are kind of testing, you know, how does it work to use these push buttons at this intersection and this raised crosswalk? You know, how is that working for folks with blindness or low vision? And so we have coordinated closely with them on how the improvements are working for that population and the context around the school.
And I'm also referring to equity as far as economic equity, you know, what neighborhoods and how we as commissioners have kind of a demographics of the area and how that affects, you know, those citizens and residents living within that. And that other piece about all ages and you know, being how that plays into it.
Yeah, so we, again, without sort of specific direction on what equity populations to look at, we do always analyze sort of equity indices so to speak, when we do transportation projects. And that's true of McLoughlin as well. We look at sort of the income, Black, Indigenous, people of color, age, renter, owner, status in a neighborhood when analyzing and evaluating these projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. If there's no further comments, we'll move on into our citizens communication part of this meeting tonight. There is a notification I would like to read prior to opening this up. The Transportation and Mobility Commission will now take public comments. Any written testimony that was received by 4 p.m. tonight will be added into the public record, as we are running short on time and will not be reading all of that public comment. Callers who have pre-registered by 4 p.m. on the Transportation and Mobility Commission survey page will be called upon tonight to address the Transportation Commission. When you are called, we will promote you to a panelist so members can see and hear you as you provide your comments. If you're providing information on behalf of a neighborhood association or other group, please tell us the name of the association and when it was voted on in the matter. Please keep your remarks brief and to the point. Remarks should be directed to the Transportation and Mobility Commission as a body, not to the audience or to the staff, please. Please do not repeat comments that have already been provided in print or verbally, and please show respect for the people commenting tonight, whether or not you agree with their comments. With that said, I would like to open it up for public comment. Jennifer, do you have, or Jan, do you have that information?
Yes, I have it,
Thank you.
Commissioner Payne. So what I have shared on the screen here is just the, to kind of reiterate what Chair Payne was sharing, just some of the conduct, the public meeting conduct. The first, obviously be courteous, and the first 4 points or 3 points in the bullet really would have more to do with us being in person. But so I'm not going to really go over that, but I am going to kind of call your name, but there are a few of you who indicated, there are a few people who indicated that they wanted to make public comment, but I can't tell based on the attendees if they are here or not. So I'm going to ask for if Deborah Cowles or Jim Lucci, if either of you are here, if you would put in the chat box for me how I can identify you in the how you show up in the attendee box, that will help me. And then what I will do is I will call your name and switch you over to a panelist so that we can, so you can talk. And at that point, would you please state your name and your address as Commissioner Payne indicated. And then when you are finished, I will switch you back to an attendee so that you can continue to listen to the meeting. I also want to note that an attendee, Todd Boulanger, you made a comment, and if you want that entered into public comment, I'll need you to comment officially. So, and you would need to let me know that by chat box. All right, so I'm going to start with Glenn Young, and so I'm going to just give me a minute here. Okay, Glenn, I'm going to promote you to panelist. And there we go. There we go. I think I see you. All right. So would you please state your name, your address, and then we'll go ahead and allow you to share what you want to share.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Glenn Young, and I live in the Haug neighborhood. First thing I would like to do is express my appreciation for all the people on this commission. It's a time-consuming endeavor, and it's much appreciated. And what I would like to speak about, and I'm glad somebody had already mentioned it. I think equity is incredibly important, and I'm kind of disappointed by the response that we received about not being clear on the direction from council on how equity involves in transportation projects. I think there's a huge amount of equity issues in all transportation projects. There always has been, and that's where context sensitivity came from. Was, you know, the typical plan was to bulldoze poor neighborhoods because the property was cheaper to acquire, and those were also diverse neighborhoods, and take those places for the implementation of freeways and other roads and such. So, you know, the changes that are made by transportation plans and projects, they really need to be evaluated from an equity standpoint. Who's winning? Is anybody losing? And I think it's critical that this committee should be given equity maps for the city of Vancouver, so that each individual project that you're looking at, you can understand the demographics better of those neighborhoods. I think that's critical. I think without understanding that information, I think there is no equity in any project if you don't understand those issues and the makeup and the demographics of different neighborhoods. I would strongly encourage every one of you on this commission to look up the Washington State direction on context sensitivity. It's huge, and it really should be the primary driver of how we make our decisions in transportation. Again, thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
If I'm on still, I apologize. My name registers as Vancouver Neighborhood Alliance. I don't, the makeup of this Zoom meeting is very strange, and I am not able to modify that. I'm not here representing the VNA. I just wanted to make sure that that was publicly known. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, I'm gonna switch you back now as an attendee, and I will be calling on Kate Fernald next. All right, Kate, you should be shifted to a panelist now.
Good evening. Can you all hear me? Yes, I see
Yes,
that again.
thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, my name is Kate Fernald. I live at 208 Tucson Way, Vancouver, Washington, 98661. And good evening, commissioners. Thank you so much for giving your time to listen to citizen testimony tonight. This is my first time testifying at your commission, and I want you to know I'm grateful for the opportunity. So, Kate Fernald, and I'm co-chair of the Heights District Neighborhood Coalition, which represents 8 different neighborhoods throughout the Heights area, one of which is Harney Heights, who is affected by the McLoughlin Safety Improvement Project. And I'm wondering, have any of you driven on McLoughlin lately? If so, you are very aware of the speed cushions that have been put in, as well as the crosswalks. And I don't know about you, but for myself, as well as the folks that I've spoken with, we have all stopped driving on McLoughlin because of the tremendous impact that these traffic mitigation strategies have had. Those speed cushions are big, and they are frequent, and they have been wildly successful in significantly reducing car travel on McLoughlin. No doubt, we heard that the city is going to measure the trip counts, and I'm certain there will be a significant reduction in traffic volume. Because these speed cushions have reduced car traffic more than any of us could have anticipated, the sharrows have consequently become safe options for the cyclists to use. If safety is the impetus for this project, and the safety issue has been unexpectedly resolved by the speed cushion implementation, then there is no need to remove the on-street parking. The speed cushions were the unanticipated solution, and the safety mission has been completed. What we have now is a unified citizenry. Our cyclists are happy now. Our residents are happy now. And you may have the power to keep it that way if you're allowed to make a recommendation. I would ask you, please keep the on-street parking on McLoughlin Boulevard. And thank you.
Thank you. And Kate, I am switching you back as an attendee now. And I'll now be calling on Brian Seth or Sooth. I'm not exactly sure of the pronunciation. And Brian, you are now promoted to panelist. Brian, I'd ask that you, would you please start your video so we can see you, and I need you to also unmute yourself. Thank you. Okay. You can go ahead and start, Brian. Can't hear you. You're not muted. Brian, you haven't, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I saw the chat come through. We could have him call in if we wanted to go to another panelist now, and maybe try him to later on if he can call in, perhaps.
Sure.
Brian,
can you nod if that's okay? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, I'm going to invite Todd Boulanger because Todd made a comment in the chat box and he is going to share it for public record. So Todd, I am promoting you to panelist. So Todd, if you'll unmute and start your video. Thank you. And then state your name and address, please.
For the record, name is Todd Boulanger. I live on Columbia Street and have for many years previously used McLoughlin as my way to work out by the mall previously. I just want to say thank you for the city for working on this. As a former member of the city's Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, this has been a long desired project. And additionally, as a transportation benefit district commissioner, this type of project is what we wanted future funds to be collected for safety and mobility enhancements. I've worked throughout the US and internationally, and protected and buffered bikeways are the state of practice. I used to be a proponent of sharrows, and as I get older, it's much more difficult to keep up with traffic. Even along Columbia, I find myself struggling, especially northbound. So I welcome the addition of buffered bikeways and protected bike lanes along the missing section in McLoughlin. And I look forward to any new data. If the previous speaker is true, then we should compare it to the Washington County Best Practice Manual and see if sharrows are really the best practice. So thank you again.
Thank you. And I will now be switching you back to an attendee, Todd. Chairman Payne, Mr. Sooth has not been able to rejoin via phone call, and so I'm not
Okay.
sure what to do at this point.
I just saw him text in on the chat saying he may have solved his mic issue. If you want to bring him back in as a panelist, we can try him one more time.
Certainly, let's do that. Okay. Brian, I am switching you to a panelist now.
By the way, his name is Sutherland.
Sutherland, thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
There he is.
Oh, good, thank you.
The floor is yours, Brian.
I'm Brian Sutherland. I live at 3301 East McLoughlin Boulevard. I appreciate the access to the commissioners, and thank you, Chair, for inviting me. I live on the main McLoughlin Boulevard. I've lived there since 1979, so I have a fair amount of experience with the neighborhood and the traffic flow. I also happen to be a property owner and have numerous properties on McLoughlin Boulevard, all of which would likely be affected by the removal of their parking. Most of you know that these homes were built in 1942 for the Kaiser Shipyard for the war effort. And they're small homes that have served us well. At one time they were going to be bulldozed, and fortunately folks started buying them up, and unlike Bagley Downs, they were allowed to remain. It's been a great community. I love my neighborhood. I do like cyclists. I have no issue with cyclists. I think very few of us have anything other than appreciation for the sport and for the transportation method. However, 1942, you were lucky to have a car, let alone 2 or 3. So these homes were designed with very small, limited parking. One of my properties has 1 space, and there isn't any place to put another. It's in the front of a garage surrounded by concrete. That's the only parking space it has. The parking is used a great deal, although much to my dismay, there's an awful lot of folks that are also parking on their yards and sides. And I know that's not proper, but it's an example of the infill. And my point in the first go around with public testimony was that the city, and rightly so, is involved in trying to create infill, more people per square acre, so to speak. As a result, I can tell you that in my rentals, there are more people than in the past applying and living in these dwellings. Most of the homes here are a variation of 1 of 3 homes that were built. And the most common is a 696 square foot bungalow. Again, not a lot of parking. So if I was to, along with the rest of my neighbors, lose that parking, it would significantly impact my financial well-being and the viability of the homes along McLoughlin. It's been suggested in the past that—
Excuse me. Commissioner Payne, we've reached the 3-minute mark.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian, for your testimony. we did not start the timer, at least make it known prior to your communication. I apologize for that.
And I did give him extra time because.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I
Brian.
know it was 3 minutes. It's the last time, but evidently we've got the gift of gab, and it is easy for me to talk.
Thank you. I'm going to
Thank
switch you
you.
back to an attendee now.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jan. Do you have any further citizen communications on hold?
I did not hear back from the other two that indicated earlier that they wanted to share in public testimony. I've reached out via the chat box if they're there. There's been no response, so I don't believe so.
Thank you. Thank you to all the citizens who offered your communication and input tonight. Prior to opening this up for commission communication, I would like to finish the business of voting on our unexcused absences. I believe we were going to vote on unexcused absences for Commissioner Rea and Commissioner Valente. Is anyone wish to make a motion to that effect?
Chair Payne, if I could, we needed to address the written comments that we received. So the citizen communication comments that we received via email. So we need to, we've gotten 16 emails total in terms of written communication for tonight's meeting. So we need to formally adopt those into the record to include in the next meeting minutes. Is that correct process, David?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. The easiest way to do this would be to have a motion to accept the written testimony, the 16, I believe, emails into the official record. And then the maker of that motion, if that's seconded, that could be voted on. And then there's no need to read through the entirety of the messages, just so long as the body is on record as accepting them.
Thank you.
I have a question. What would be a rationale for not accepting written testimony?
Chair, if I can respond?
Please.
Well, Commissioner Williams, it would be rare. I can think if testimony was received that perhaps appears to be fraudulent or from an email address that may not be verifiable, or if it's a testimony that simply is not germane to anything you ever deal with. For example, if it's about, I don't know, the police department and how they act in a certain situation. So those are the only two types of situations I can think of where you might not want to accept them. But by and large, everything you receive will be considered part of the record. But there is that formality just to weed out those potential innocuous or perhaps just not germane comments that you may receive from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then I will, would anyone care to make a motion to enter in the 16 written letters to public record?
Further question, I did not have a chance to read the second batch of emails that came out quite late today. I read the first 11. I found them all germane, but I cannot comment on the content of the last 5 that I didn't see until too late.
So then for clarification on this, David, would this be something that we would table for the next meeting, or should we accept as a vote of, is it abstain?
Thank you, Chair. So my suggestion would be, a quick perusal is fine, and you're really voting just to make sure that it's part of the record. If there's some reason why you think something specific really shouldn't be, then that's okay to call out. But if you've received them, I think it's fine to accept them as part of the record. And if it turns out, for whatever reason, it really isn't pertinent to anything you do, there's no harm done in accepting it into your record.
And for clarification, they can be removed from the record in future meetings if necessary and irrelevant.
Yes, certainly there could be some action you could take down the road if there's something like that, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams, does that satisfy your question?
Well, I was just wondering if somebody else saw the 5 and could just tell me, oh yeah, they're all about McLoughlin. In which case, I'm happy.
I did read them and they are germane to our meeting tonight, yes.
Then I'm happy.
Thank you. Anyone wish to make a motion to accept those into public record?
Williams moves to put all 16 written messages into the record.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone want to second that?
I will second that, Commissioner Ruggles.
Thank you. Motion has been passed, or motion has been made. Will you please take the vote, Jan?
Certainly. Commissioner Hardy,
Aye.
Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson,
Aye.
Commissioner Payne,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruggles,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Our unanimous decision, we will accept those into public record. And to complete our business on the unexcused absences, are we clear to proceed? Anyone wish to make a motion to unexcuse the absences of our 2 missing commissioners tonight?
I motion, oh, it's Commissioner Jackson. I motion to unexcuse the unexcused absences.
Anyone second that?
Chair, if I may interject before
Please.
we get to a second there. Thank you, Chair. And under your rules, the way that it is set forth in Article 7 in Section 1, the attendance, an absence is considered unexcused. The commission may be excused, or an absence may be excused by the commission. However, it's presumed that if there is an absence, it is unexcused. So if you have excused certain members, it is presumed that those that you have not excused are unexcused. So you would not need to necessarily take proactive action.
Thank you. And I asked that, you may not have been quite onto the meeting prior at the beginning. I had to pose that question as well, and I appreciate the clarification on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
May I ask a question, David, then? There was so they had a previous motion to come back and address this. Would that be included in the public record, since that was not necessarily needed?
So, Chair, if I may address that question. There were 2 absences that were excused, is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
So those that were excused have already been dealt with, and I think that if there is a motion to excuse anybody else who has not previously been excused, that could be taken up at this time. If that's not done, then it's presumed that those who have not been excused and who are currently absent from the meeting are unexcused at that point. If that clarifies.
So we had a motion to move to the end of the meeting. We had a motion and a vote to move to the end of meeting to decide if these 2 people were unexcused or not. So we had a motion and a vote to do that.
That's correct, to have that discussion at this time, which we are having right now.
Okay.
There's no need necessarily for there to be a motion to excuse the other 2 members. It can be made at this time, or it cannot.
So do I need to, I just was confused. Do I need to include that in the minutes, that first motion that we did at the beginning of the meeting?
Correct. That
Okay,
discussion
that's all I
was
needed to know.
tabled. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I think I've got that one down for future knowledge now. I appreciate your clarification on that. So we have just a couple of minutes left here. I'll open it up. Was there anything from staff that we needed to address? Anything from, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I just look forward to we've got 2 more onboarding sessions this month, and I think they're going to be really good conversations. So I look forward to having everybody attending those.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just have a I have a question about previous, sorry, I need to put my mask back on. I've got people in here now. If all of the previous letters that have been submitted in regards to McLoughlin are going to be accessible by this commission, given that we just suddenly had these 16 letters. I know that there have been many, many letters in regards to how people feel about this project, and I'm just wondering if those just have to all be redone, or?
Chair, if I could address that question?
Yes, please, David.
Thank you. Yeah, so Commissioner Jackson, the specific emails that we're talking about today are the ones that were submitted in connection with the agenda item being considered tonight by this body. So anything previously being sent to staff or being sent to the city in general, those, if they've been transmitted to this body previously, that's something that is already, or staff is already considering those. The staff itself doesn't necessarily need to have those considered by this body in order to take those into consideration. However, what we have tonight are specific comments that are the public comments submitted in response to this being an agenda item for this commission. So those are just because they're supposed to be, in an ideal world, somebody would have shown up and said this before you if we were all together. This is just a different way of allowing somebody to testify before you. That doesn't negate any of the other comments that were made previously or need to change anything that you've done previously. It's just, these are just the comments for tonight's meeting specifically.
Okay, then possibly a question for staff when we're, if we get to the point where we are reviewing this project and asked to make a decision, will we be seeing some of those previous comments?
Yes, Commissioner Jackson, if I may answer your question, yes, you would see all previous comments. All comments collected throughout the history of the project are a part of the project record, so to speak, and will be included in the summary of public outreach.
Anna, I have a question for you. This is Commissioner Ruggles again, and I'm glad you're still here. I'm wondering, one of the pieces was examining other ways of dealing with parking, and I'm wondering how much that's been explored. Like, would that be like, you know, turning a street into a one-way street, and then because it mentioned neighborhood streets or angled parking, or has anything yet been looked at at that level?
Yes, so, you know, I want to be sensitive to time here, but we have, for the McLoughlin project and other projects, explored various ways of accommodating parking. For McLoughlin specifically, as I mentioned, we haven't instituted anything, but some options that we could look at in the future would include improving side streets to accommodate additional parking spaces, as well as potentially working one-on-one with neighbors to identify off-street parking on their property.
Well, I think that about concludes our time for this evening. I want to thank all the participants, all the commissioners, the city staff. I appreciate everybody being here tonight. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And David, your puppy is adorable.
Thank you. He's a little, he just got back from a 2-week training session, so he's very needy right now.
Oh,
Nice.
I hope he's always joining us.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.